The maintenance bay's exposed power conduit carried enough voltage to vaporize a Velkari warrior, and the human just grabbed it with her bare hand. Zilnix's mandibles locked mid-click as his entire body went rigid. The diagnostic panel screamed warnings in 3 languages, cascading red alerts painting his workstation like a crime scene. The numbers didn't lie. 8,000 volts running hot through that conduit, enough amperage to reduce his chitin-plated hide to ash in under 2 seconds. And the human electrician named Brianna was touching it. Bare fingers wrapped around braided copper like she was checking fruit for ripeness. "No!" The word died in Zilnix's throat. The cubs screamed first. 4 juvenile Velkari erupted from their observation nest in the upper gallery, their high-pitched distress calls piercing through every frequency. Not the playful yips of young predators at games. Real terror. The sound Velkari Young made when pack members faced death. "Hurt! Hurt! Hurt!" The largest cub, couldn't have been more than 6 seasons old, hit the deck plating at a dead sprint, claws scrabbling for purchase. "No, wait!" Zilnix lurched forward, then froze. Stop the cubs from charging into electrical hazard? Or call medical for the human who should already be dead? Brianna turned her head, honey-colored hair swinging as she looked at the approaching cubs with genuine confusion. "Hey, what's wrong?" She was still holding the wire. The monitors weren't lying. 8,000 volts. Live current. Zilnix could see the energy reading spiking with each pulse. His own people used lower voltages for military-grade deterrent fencing. This was infrastructure power, the kind that ran life support and gravity plating across 6 decks. The cubs didn't care about voltage ratings. They swarmed Brianna's legs in a furry avalanche of cream and amber stripes, tiny bodies pressing against her coveralls. The smallest one, barely weaned, tried climbing her leg with needle-sharp claws, mewling in panic. The largest cub grabbed her pant leg in his jaws, not biting but tugging with desperate urgency. "Back! Get back!" Zilnix finally found his voice, stumbling forward on his 4 primary limbs. His tool harness clattered against his thorax. "The current! You'll all—" Brianna blinked at him, then down at the wire in her hand. "Oh, sorry, is this on?" She glanced at the conduit junction. "Yeah, looks hot. I was just checking the connection integrity before I swap out the relay." Just checking. The diagnostic panel's alarms hit a new pitch as Brianna adjusted her grip, her thumb pressing against an exposed conductor point. The cubs' distress calls intensified into something between whines and roars. Sounds Zilnix had only heard during combat drills when instructors simulated pack member casualties. "Put it down!" Zilnix's vocoder crackled with interference from his own panic. "Release the conduit! Medical emergency protocol! Emergency!" Brianna's eyebrows drew together in that peculiar human expression of confusion. She looked at the wire, then at the screaming cubs pawing at her legs, then back at Zilnix. What emergency? The smallest cub managed to scale Brianna's thigh and was now patting her arm with both tiny paws, whimpering continuously. The sound cut straight through Zilnix's hearts. Both of them. That was the noise young Velkari made when trying to wake unconscious parents. "The voltage!" Zilnix gestured at his panel with one manipulator limb while his other 3 braced against the deck. 8,000 volts. Lethal current. You should be. You are. How are you? Brianna followed his gesture to the diagnostic readout, squinted at the numbers, then laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was bright and utterly incongruous with the cub's continued distress calls. "Oh man, yeah, that's pretty spicy." She grinned at him while the smallest cub started licking her wrist frantically, as if trying to heal a wound that didn't exist. "Don't worry, this is standard. I'm insulated enough for a quick check, haven't even tingled yet." Tingled. The word echoed in Zilnix's mind like a malfunctioning translation matrix. Tingled. She described potential instant death as tingling. The cubs were now all crying in earnest, their distress a chorus of breaking whimpers and desperate yips. The largest cub abandoned Brianna's pant leg and pressed his entire body against her shin. vibrating with distress. Another cub was trying to insert himself between Brianna and the wall, as if his tiny body could shield her from the conduit. The station-wide alarm still hadn't triggered. The safety systems probably couldn't compute what they were witnessing. Zilnix understood the feeling. Brianna crouched down, finally releasing the wire. It swung loose, still live, still deadly, arcing faint blue at the connection point. She extended both hands toward the cubs, palms up. Hey, it's okay, little guys. I'm fine. See? All good. The cubs swarmed her immediately, tiny noses working overtime, checking every centimeter of her exposed skin. Their whimpers shifted from terror to confusion, then to something that sounded almost accusatory. Zilnix's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the deck plating, all four limbs splaying in different directions. Brianna was alive. The cubs were alive. Nothing made sense, and the human was smiling at the younglings like this was perfectly normal. Seriously, though, what's wrong with them? Brianna asked, gently extracting a cub who was attempting to wrap himself around her forearm like a living bandage. She stood up, and immediately all four cubs plastered themselves against her legs again. Are they okay? Zilnix managed to get his breathing spiracles under control. What's wrong with them? His vocoder hit frequencies he didn't know he could produce. Humans cannot. The electrical current. Oh, Brianna's face did that, softening thing humans did when they understood something. She looked down at the cubs, who were still whimpering and pawing at her coveralls like they were searching for injuries. You guys thought I was hurt. The largest cub responded with a mournful yip that somehow conveyed both yes and why aren't you dead? Brianna. Zilnix forced himself back onto his legs, though they trembled. That conduit carries enough power to stop all three of my hearts simultaneously. No organic being can survive contact with... She was reaching for the wire again. Don't! Too late. Brianna grabbed the conduit with her right hand, her left hand pulling a small scanning device from her tool belt. The cubs' reaction was instantaneous and catastrophic. Their distress calls doubled in volume, and two of them tried climbing her simultaneously while the other two attempted to pull her away from the wall. I just need to... Guys, seriously, I can't work if you're... Brianna awkwardly shuffled backward, dragging four panicking cubs with her. She didn't drop the wire. Zilnix, can you call whoever watches these little guys? They're really upset. The maintenance chief couldn't form words. His translator kept suggesting phrases like suicidal insanity and death wish, and none of them seemed adequate. Then the door to the nursery annex burst open. 6 more cubs poured into the maintenance bay, their ear-splitting cries joining the chorus. Behind them, 3 adult Velkari appeared, their larger frames filling the doorway. The caretaker, Nixily, took one look at the scene, and her pupils dilated to full moons. What is happening to the younglings? She bounded forward, then stopped dead when she saw Brianna, still holding the wire, still surrounded by distraught cubs. Why is the human... Is she injured? No. Zilnix gestured wildly at his diagnostic panel. She's holding a live power conduit, 8,000 volts. The security team arrived next, drawn by the cubs' distress calls, no doubt. Juxnar, the shift commander, appeared with 2 deputies, all 3 of them armed and alert. They scanned the room for threats, found none, then focused on the obvious problem, which was Brianna, still casually gripping enough voltage to kill them all, now with 10 cubs attempting a coordinated rescue operation. Human. Juxnar's voice carried the flat calm of someone trained for every crisis, except this one. Release the power source. Slowly. Oh, sure, I'm almost done anyway. Brianna consulted her scanner, nodded to herself, then disconnected the wire from its housing. She used her other hand, making the cubs scream louder, to detach the conduit completely. Connection's good, just needed to verify before I install the new relay. She held the wire up, and every adult Velkari in the room took an involuntary step backward. The cubs, however, surged forward the instant Brianna's hands were empty. 10 small predators conducted the most thorough medical examination Zelniks had ever witnessed. Tiny noses pressed against her palms, miniature claws gently, so gently, touching her fingers, checking for burns that weren't there. "See? I'm fine." Brianna wiggled her fingers. The cubs inspected each digit with serious intensity. Not even a little zap. Human skin is pretty resistant to... That's not possible. Nixily moved closer, her own nose twitching with confusion. The voltage would penetrate any organic barrier. Scales, hide, chitin, none of it matters at that amperage. Brianna pulled out her voltage meter, checked the reading on the now disconnected conduit, and showed it to Zelniks. 8.2 kilovolts. Yeah, that's what the specs said. Good thing I wasn't standing in water or anything. Standing in water? Zelniks' vocoder nearly shorted out. That would have been bad, Brianna agreed cheerfully. She crouched down again, and the cubs immediately clustered around her, still making worried sounds. "Hey, little guardians. I promise I'm okay. This is just my job." The smallest cub placed both tiny paws on Brianna's cheeks, staring into her eyes with an intensity that would have been adorable under different circumstances. His whimper said, "Your job is terrible." Juxnar holstered his weapon slowly. Why are the cubs acting like she's Pac? I don't know. Nixily circled the group, her trained caretaker's eye cataloging every behavior. They're displaying protection instincts, but she's not injured. She's not even distressed. "Maybe they know something we don't," one of Juxnar's deputies muttered. The largest cub had positioned himself between Brianna and the wall of conduits, his small body rigid with determination. His message was clear. No more death wires. Brianna laughed, actually laughed, and gently scratched behind his ears. "You are the sweetest thing, but I've got like 6 more connections to check today." All 10 cubs responded with a unified sound of absolute denial. HFY arrived in the maintenance bay with the purposeful stride of someone who'd been interrupted during important research and expected a good reason. The senior biologist took one look at Brianna, surrounded by 10 cubs in full protective formation, and pulled out 3 different recording devices. "Fascinating," she breathed. "Fascinating." Zelniks gestured at the chaos. "Your cubs have adopted a human who treats lethal voltage like a handshake. Not my cubs." HFY circled the group slowly, her recording devices humming. "They belong to the station creche. But this behavior..." She zoomed in on the largest cub, who had positioned himself directly in front of Brianna's tool belt. "This is pack protection instinct, reserved for vulnerable members." Brianna tried to reach for her wire strippers. The largest cub immediately batted her hand away with a paw, claws carefully retracted. "Okay, buddy, I really need those." Brianna moved for the tool belt again. 3 cubs instantly blocked her access, their small bodies forming a living barrier. "Guys, come on, I have a job to do." The smallest cub grabbed the wire strippers in his mouth and dragged them across the deck, away from Brianna. "He just stole my tools!" Brianna looked genuinely offended. "That's a Klein 16-gauge stripper. Those aren't cheap." "They're protecting you from dangerous implements," HFY murmured, recording every second. "They've identified you as Pac, specifically as a Pac member who makes catastrophically poor survival decisions." Nixily made a choking sound that might have been laughter. Brianna stood up carefully, trying not to step on any cubs. They immediately rose with her, maintaining their protective circle. "Look, I appreciate the concern, but humans are built different. We can handle stuff that would hurt you guys." "Demonstrably untrue," Juxnar said flatly. "I've read the human integration files. Your species is classified as improbably fragile compared to galactic average." "Well, yeah, we're squishy." Brianna poked her own arm. "But our nervous systems are weird. Electrical resistance is actually pretty decent as long as..." She noticed all the adult Velkari staring at her. "What?" "You just described yourself as squishy," Zelniks said slowly, "while arguing that you're durable." The cub's whimpering intensified, as if they understood the contradiction and found it deeply troubling. Brianna sighed and pulled rubber gloves from her back pocket. "Fine. Look, little guys. See these? Safety equipment. I'm supposed to wear them when checking live connections." She wiggled the bright yellow gloves. "Usually I don't, because the voltage is low enough that..." Every cub in the room released a sound somewhere between a whine and a roar. "Usually you don't." Kixava's recording devices nearly fell from her manipulators. "You have protection equipment that you choose not to use. The gloves reduced tactile feedback," Brianna explained, which somehow made it worse. "I can feel connection problems through my fingertips if I'm not wearing..." Why are they crying harder? The smallest cub had collapsed dramatically at Brianna's feet, paws over his eyes, making sounds of existential despair. "Because you just confirmed their worst fears," Nixily said softly. "You're not accidentally vulnerable, you're intentionally reckless." "I'm efficient," Brianna protested. The cubs responded with accusatory yips. "Okay, fine, maybe a little reckless. But that's just how humans are. We do risk assessment and..." "Your risk assessment is broken," Juxnar interrupted. "Clearly." Kixava was typing frantically on one device while the other two recorded. "This is unprecedented. The cubs aren't wrong to be protective. By any reasonable biological standard, this human should be dead. Their instincts correctly identify the danger, but their sensory input contradicts the expected outcome. The cognitive dissonance is..." The maintenance bay doors opened again. Station Commander Jixel entered, his scarred hide and missing ear marking him as a veteran of actual combat. He took in the scene with one sweep of his predator eyes. "Somebody want to explain why I'm getting emergency calls about cubs having a psychological breakdown in maintenance?" "The human touched death voltage," Zilnik said helplessly. "Repeatedly. The cubs are trying to save her from herself." Jixel looked at Brianna, then at the protective ring of cubs, then at the exposed conduits. His tale did something complicated that Zilnix recognized as the Velkari equivalent of a systems error. "And she's alive?" "Aggressively so," Juxnar confirmed. The largest cub left Brianna's side for the first time, trotting purposefully to a supply crate. He returned, dragging a ration pack, standard Velkari nutrition supplement, and dropped it at Brianna's feet. Then sat down and stared at her expectantly. "Oh no," Kixva whispered. "Food offering behavior." Two more cubs immediately joined in, racing to find offerings. One returned with a cleaning cloth. Another dragged over somebody's abandoned lunch container. The smallest cub, not to be outdone, presented Brianna with a bolt he'd found under a console. They arranged their gifts in a careful semicircle around her feet and waited. "They're trying to help her recover," Nixily explained quietly, "from what they perceive as a traumatic injury, even though she's not injured. Yet," the largest cub's posture seemed to say. "Give her 5 minutes and she'll grab another death wire." Brianna looked down at the offerings, then up at the ring of expectant little faces. Her expression went through several emotions before landing on something between touched and exasperated. "You guys are the sweetest, most paranoid creatures I've ever met," she said softly. Jixel cleared his throat. "Someone want to tell me why we have cubs conducting interspecies medical intervention on my station?" Kixva held up her recording devices. "Because human safety standards and biological reality have nothing to do with each other, and the cubs figured it out first." Brianna sat down cross-legged on the deck plating, and the cubs immediately arranged themselves around her like furry satellites. The largest cub claimed her lap. The smallest wedged himself against her side. The other 8 formed a protective perimeter, all ears perked forward in intense focus. "Okay, so here's the thing about humans," Brianna began, as if addressing a class of unusually concerned students. "We're really good at surviving stuff that should kill us, but we're also really bad at recognizing when we should be scared." Jixel settled onto his haunches near Kixva, who was still recording everything. Zilnix, Nixily, and the security team formed a loose circle around the group. "Take electricity." Brianna held up one hand, wiggling her fingers. The cub in her lap immediately grabbed her wrist, as if to prevent any further wire touching. Human skin. The dry outer layer, it's actually a pretty good insulator. Takes a lot to push current through it. That 8,000-volt line? Uncomfortable if I held it too long, but not immediately deadly. Define too long, Jixel said carefully. Maybe 10, 15 seconds before I'd feel the burn. Brianna shrugged. Every cub made distressed sounds. What? That's actually pretty good. Now if my hands were wet, or if the voltage was higher, or if... The cub's whimpering crescendoed. Okay, maybe that's not helping. Brianna switched tactics. Look, let me show you other stuff humans do. Normal stuff. She pulled her thermos from her tool belt. The cubs eyed it suspiciously. Brianna unscrewed the cap, and steam rose from the opening. She took a casual sip. That's near boiling temperature, Kikva said, her recording devices zooming in on the thermos. 95 degrees Celsius minimum. Good coffee needs to be hot. Brianna took another sip. The cubs stared at her mouth like they expected it to burst into flames. Humans drink hot liquids all the time. We eat food at temperatures that would burn most species' mouths. It's normal for us. Normal, Zilnix repeated weakly. And look at this. Brianna pointed at the maintenance ladder leading to the upper gallery. The same ladder she'd climbed 3 times today. That's 8 meters high, no safety harness. I went up and down checking connections. You climbed? Nixily looked at the ladder with new horror. Without fall protection? Well, yeah, it's not that high. Brianna noticed every adult Velkari staring at her. What? You guys can jump that distance easy. We're built for jumping, Juxnar said. We have reinforced skeletal structures and landing reflexes bred over millions of years. He gestured at her general squishy humanity. I'm careful, Brianna offered. The cubs made sounds of profound skepticism. Kixva lowered her recording devices slowly. Commander, I believe I understand what's happening. The cubs' protective instincts aren't malfunctioning. They're responding appropriately to an objective threat assessment. Meaning? Jixel's tail twitched. Meaning, humans are vulnerable by galactic standards. Their durability is narrow and situational, effective against specific threats, but catastrophically inadequate for others. They compensate with risk tolerance so extreme, it reads as pathological to predator species. Hey, Brianna protested. The cub in her lap patted her chest sympathetically. The cubs recognize this, Kixva continued, her academic excitement growing. They see a being who survives dangers she shouldn't, using methods she can't explain, while insisting she's fine. To young Velkari, that's a pack member in denial about serious injuries. Of course they're protective. The largest cub looked up at Brianna and made a soft chirruping sound that somehow conveyed, "See? We're not crazy. You're crazy." Jixel stood, his command presence filling the bay. So the cubs are right. This human requires supervision. I do not, Brianna started. You just admitted to climbing 8 meters without fall protection, drinking near boiling liquids, and intentionally touching voltage that could stop my hearts, Jixel interrupted. The cubs are demonstrating better threat assessment than you are. Brianna opened her mouth, closed it, looked down at the cubs watching her with worried eyes and perked ears. Okay, when you put it that way, will you use your safety equipment? The smallest cub's expression was so hopeful it hurt to look at. Yes, Brianna said quietly. I'll wear the gloves, and the harness when I climb, and I'll try to be more careful. The transformation was immediate. 10 cubs relaxed simultaneously, their distress calls fading to contented rumbles. The largest cub in her lap bumped his head against her chin affectionately. The smallest one started purring, an actual purr that vibrated against her ribs. But they didn't leave. The largest cub exchanged glances with 2 others. Some kind of silent communication passed between them. Then they rearranged themselves deliberately, 3 cubs staying close to Brianna, 2 positioning themselves near her tool belt, the rest spreading out to watch the conduits and ladder. They've established a guard rotation, Nixley breathed. They're taking shifts. HFY's devices were recording at maximum capacity. This is going in every xenobiology journal in the collective. Cross-species protection protocols developing in real time. Jixel's expression did something complicated. Then he tapped his communicator. Station protocol update. All Velkari cubs are hereby authorized as human safety monitors. Their protective instincts are to be considered valid threat assessments until proven otherwise. You're assigning cubs to supervise humans? Juxnar sounded incredulous. The cubs are better at it than we are, Jixel said simply. They recognized the problem before any adult did. Brianna, you have your work assignment. Your new assignment also includes not giving your guards cardiac failure. Brianna looked down at the 3 cubs who'd claimed permanent positions around her. So I have babysitters? The largest cub's expression suggested he considered himself more of a live-in safety inspector. Think of them as enthusiastic co-workers, HFY offered, still recording. Brianna scratched behind the largest cub's ears. He leaned into the touch, but his eyes never left her tool belt. Fine, but they better not slow me down. The cub's unified expression said, That's exactly the point. Brianna arrived at the maintenance bay the next morning to find 3 cubs waiting outside her locker. The largest one, she'd started calling him Big Guy in her head, sat at attention like a furry sentinel. The moment he spotted her, his ears perked up and he trotted over for inspection. Good morning to you too. Brianna held out her hands. Big Guy sniffed them thoroughly, checking for overnight injuries. She definitely didn't have. See? Still intact. The smallest cub, who she'd mentally dubbed Little Bit, emerged from behind a storage container carrying her tool belt in his mouth. He'd apparently retrieved it from the secure cabinet. Somehow. How did you even... Never mind. Brianna accepted the belt. All 3 cubs watched intently as she strapped it on, their eyes tracking every tool like tiny inspectors cataloging dangerous equipment. Zilnix appeared from the upper level, descending the ladder with careful precision. Your escort is prompt. They were here when I arrived. Brianna pulled out her multimeter. Big Guy immediately positioned himself between her and the nearest conduit. Is this going to be my life now? Look around, Zilnix suggested. Brianna glanced toward the main corridor. 3 human engineers walked past, each accompanied by a small pack of cubs. The cubs trotted alongside their assigned humans like devoted shadows, occasionally chirping what sounded like warnings when their humans got too close to anything potentially hazardous. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Station-wide implementation as of 0600 hours, Zilnix said, his mandibles clicking with amusement. Every human on maintenance rotation now has cub supervision. The younglings volunteered in overwhelming numbers. A human named Jenna passed by with 4 cubs trailing her. One cub was carrying her safety goggles in his mouth. Another kept nudging her legs whenever she walked too fast. They think we're all disasters waiting to happen, Brianna muttered. Are they wrong? Zilnix countered. Before Brianna could respond, Little Bit made a sharp yip, high-pitched and urgent. She'd taken 1 step toward the conduit panel. Big Guy reinforced the warning with a deeper bark that clearly meant stop right there. I'm just going to check the connections. Big Guy's expression said he'd heard that before. He positioned himself more firmly in front of the panel, then looked pointedly at her tool belt, specifically at the rubber gloves clipped to her side. Fine. Brianna pulled on the gloves with exaggerated movements. Happy now? All 3 cubs relaxed fractionally, though their eyes never stopped tracking her movements. Little Bit made a pleased chirrup that sounded like approval. Over the next hour, Brianna discovered the cubs had developed an entire vocabulary of warning sounds. Sharp yips for electrical hazards, deeper barks for climbing without harnesses, a specific trill for that liquid is too hot, a warbling sound that meant you're working too fast and going to make mistakes. They weren't wrong about that last one. Okay, this is actually pretty useful, Brianna admitted when Little Bit's trills stopped her from grabbing her coffee before it cooled. She'd been about to burn her tongue for the 3rd time this week. Kixva appeared around midday, still carrying recording devices. "How's the integration progressing?" "They're better safety officers than my last supervisor," Brianna said. Big Guy preened slightly at the compliment. "Watch this." She reached for her wire cutters. Big Guy immediately picked them up in his mouth, carried them to her, and waited while she showed him exactly which wire she planned to cut. Only after his careful inspection, sniffing the wire, checking the tool, verifying she was wearing gloves, did he allow her to proceed. Remarkable. Kixva's devices hummed. "They're learning your work patterns and developing preventive protocols. They're also slowing me down," Brianna noted, though without real complaint. "Station maintenance errors have dropped 62% since implementation," Zilnix called from his workstation. "Turns out humans take fewer dangerous shortcuts when cubs are judging them." Jenna walked past again, this time carrying a cub who'd apparently decided she looked tired. The other 3 cubs in her pack were having an animated discussion, all chirps and yips, probably debating whether she needed a break. "We've created a station run by small furry safety inspectors," Brianna observed. "Best command decision I've made in years." Jixel's voice came from the doorway. The commander watched a human named Derek being gently herded away from a ladder by 5 concerned cubs. "Incident reports are down. Efficiency is actually up because we're preventing mistakes, and the cubs are learning valuable skills." "Like how to manage reckless humans?" Brianna asked. "Like how to manage reckless humans," Jixel agreed gravely. Late afternoon found Brianna finishing her last connection check. She reached for an exposed conduit, just to test one final voltage reading, and forgot about the gloves. Big Guy's teeth closed gently but firmly on her sleeve, pulling her hand back before she made contact. Not biting, never biting, but absolutely preventing her from touching that wire. Little Bit was already retrieving the gloves from where she'd set them down. The 3rd cub, who she'd started calling Guardian, positioned himself between her and the entire electrical panel, his small body radiating determination. Brianna looked at the 3 little faces staring up at her with concern and unwavering dedication. Big Guy still had her sleeve in his mouth. Guardian's ears were flat with worry. Little Bit held out the gloves like an offering to the gods of common sense. She laughed, couldn't help it, and accepted the gloves. Okay, I'll use the gloves. You win, little guardians." The cubs' triumphant chirps echoed through the maintenance bay, and somewhere in the background, Zilnix's mandibles clicked with what might have been laughter.